And then I will start admitting people in. I'm just going to wait maybe 3 minutes more and we will begin.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Fine Arts Program of the Lab, we welcome you to our third artist talk of the semester. Today, we will be talking with Amy Stacey Curtis, who is an installation artist focusing on participatory works. Curtis lives in Liam, Maine. Amy has received the Maine Arts Commission in 2005 and 2017. She received the Individual Artist Fellow for Visual Art and is also the recipient of numerous grants, including those from I don't know how to pronounce this, but Berkshire Tectonic Community Foundation, Foundation for Contemporary Arts, Robert Rauschenberg Foundation, and Samuel Newhouse Foundation. Curtis has exhibited interactive art internationally. From 1998 to 2016, Curtis completed an 18-year project, 9 solo biennial exhibits of large in scope, interactive art in 9 vast mill spaces throughout Maine. In the end, Curtis mounted 81 participatory installations while cleaning by hand each historic space. After her 18-year project was finished, Curtis had been working towards new interactive projects in her studio when she was debilitated by neurological illness. After 2 psychiatric wards, the start of severe movement and speech disorder, and 15 months of unknowns, it was finally determined that Curtis had suffered a brain injury caused by never treated Lyme disease. Since the start of her disability in March 2017, all while progressing from wheelchair to walker to cane back to her feet, Curtis has been presenting new interactive concepts with help from assistants, curators, and the arts community. And I think this is a quick resume of who is Amy and what Amy has been doing in these past years. By the way, anyone who wants to make a question, please write them in the chat, directed to me so I can ask her directly. Or also you can raise your hand and we can give you the word and you can ask the question by yourself. Well, welcome, Amy, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Now, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me to do this. I've been very excited. I'm going to share my screen right away. Get this going. So fancy that we can do this. Okay. I wonder if that will go away. So I have no idea how to get rid of that thing up top. It's suddenly there. It's okay.
If you want, you can stop sharing and try again. But can you try unmarking the box that reads optimize for a video clip?
You want me to, let's see. You want me to click the box that says optimize for video clip?
It should be on mark.
Should I?
It should be unmarked so that bar goes away.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry about the technical difficulty. I don't know why the bar is now here, but I'm going to start and hopefully you all can ignore the bar. So I have been creating interactive work since '98. And as Siglinde was saying, I did an 18-year project where I installed large in scope interactive works in 9 different vast mill spaces throughout the state of Maine. So every 2 years, I would take over a abandoned mill that had not been used for many years, had been abandoned. And I cleaned each space by hand on my hands and feet. The spaces averaged about 25,000 square feet. And each exhibit had a different theme. The themes were experience, movement, change, sound, light, time, space, matter, and the last solo biennial was titled Memory. So the first solo biennial and the last solo biennials were experience and memory, and I thought they would make interesting bookends for the project. I want to talk about my work and sort of, and also my work process in terms of symmetry today. There's sort of a symmetrical aspect to working what I've been saying, pre-solo biennials, meaning the completion of this 18-year project, and then post-biennial, which has been since my brain injury. There's been kind of symmetry in that, as well as symmetry that went throughout my 18-year project. And symmetry has kind of a different context now for me than it did before with my injury. So some more details about my biennials in terms of symmetry. At each exhibit, there were 9 interactive works, and each explored whatever the respective theme was, but I always repeated one installation or revisited one installation from a previous biennial in a present one to show how all of these different themes related. And by incorporating the number 9 throughout the whole project, 9 biennials, 9 different mill spaces, 9 different towns, 9 interactive works throughout. And within each piece itself, if there was a multiple, there was always a multiple of 9. That would add symmetry and balance to the whole, what I consider to be my opus, this 18-year project. And there is also symmetry in the fact that for each of these installations, there were instructions that I asked participants to read before they approach the work, which would convey to them what it is I am asking them to do to participate. And the audience literally completed my creative process. So I would instigate each work, and then each participant would perpetuate it forward, help me see my vision through. And so there was a kind of symmetry between the control that I put into giving these different instructions and in how my careful arrangement of things. And then there was an opposite sometimes that would happen, a bookend, a balance, where the audience would participate. Many would try to follow my instructions and sometimes interpret them. Most understood what I was asking, and some interpreted that, and then some even kind of rebelled and did what they felt like doing, which was sometimes the opposite of what I asked. And I never interjected unless somebody was doing something which could injure themselves. So even though I'm instigating a work, sometimes it would unfold in ways I would never expect. I'm just going to show you one or two pieces from each of the solo biennials. Again, there were 9 different works in each one. So in the end, I installed 81 different works throughout this project. This was one of the 9 works in my very first solo biennial, which was called Experience. This was in the year 2000 in a mill in Lewiston, Maine. I used 30,000 square feet that hadn't been used in 20 years and cleaned it all by hand. This piece, one of the 9 works, is called Meniscus. It's 9 glass 14-inch tall cylinders on this pedestal, and the metal bowls at the base of the pedestal had water in them, as well as droppers and little plastic cups. And what I did at the opening reception was fill the glass almost to the point of spilling, just before that point of spilling, when the upper curvature of water would form. If you add any more, it would actually spill over, but I didn't. I filled just to this point. And then the instructions invited participants to, if the water looked like it had evaporated, to add water to the piece to maintain these 9 different water levels. And one thing that was interesting that happened that I didn't plan for was that participants seemed to assume that each would evaporate by the same amount. So they would instinctively try to add the same number of drops to each menisci. This is one installation from my second solo biennial, Movement, which was in 2002 at a mill in Westbrook, Maine. And I just want to mention that each solo biennial was 22 months of very intense labor, from conceptualizing the 9 works for the exhibit through to pre-production, through to actually cleaning the mill, installing and takedown. And then I would always take 2 months off in between each biennial cycle to rest. This piece from Movement was called Volition 1. And I had routed 4,624 holes into this 6 by 6 foot square of red oak. And I inserted 9 rods into 9 of the holes, choosing as randomly as possible. And I asked participants to remove the 9 rods and for each of them to place the rods as randomly as possible. It was fascinating to watch because everyone has a different idea of what randomness is. So some people would do kind of what I did. I kind of walked around the table and tried to choose holes as if I were picking cards out of a deck randomly, try to do it without thinking about it. And other participants would put 1 rod in each of the corners, 1 rod in the center of each side, and then 1 rod in the center. And actually, there was a really big percentage of people who placed their rods in that exact pattern as opposed to randomly. This is one of the installations I did at my third solo biennial. Again, this is one of 9 works. This is called Shift 1. It's 9 4-foot pedestals. And I had, through my exhibit postcards and marketing, I asked participants to please each bring to the exhibit a small personal possession with which they felt they could part forever. And at the reception, I placed on each pedestal a small personal possession that I felt I could part with forever. And then over the course of the biennial, hundreds of objects were given and taken as people participated. Some of the things that people exchanged were more spontaneous things they happened to have in their pockets or their bags, and other things were objects that people had really put quite some thought into. For example, things that were representative of things in their life that they wanted to let go. One of the things that fascinated me about this piece was that some of the more spontaneous things, like a dandered comb and there was a wad of gum that had been chewed and placed on a wrapper and left on one of the pedestals. Each of these things were also exchanged, which I thought was really interesting. For my 4th solo biennial, which was sound, this one was at Lockwood Mill in Waterville, Maine. One of the 9 works that I did was 9 metronomes. This 9 metronomes, and I set them all at the same tempo, which was 144 beats per minute. And I built a tool that would allow me to, after I wound them all up, to start them all at the same time. And even though they were set at the same tempo and started at the same time, because of chaos and variation from object to object, they go in and out of patterns. I'll just play you a little video so you can see what it looked like for me to start the work, and we'll just listen to it for a little bit. I'll just show you one more work from my sound solo biennial. This was called Labyrinth 3. I asked participants to think of movement, to think of a sound that they could repeat 9 times to make the sound at each closed circle on the way into the center, and then the sound again on the open circles. And I have some video of people participating with this.
Boom. 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 Boom.
This is a work that I did for my 5th solo biennial light, which was in 2008. This was a mill space that was 26,000 square feet, and it was my most ambitious to prepare for my work. It had last been used as a paintball business, and I had to literally scrape and to get all of the paintball matter off the walls and the columns and take down a lot of structures and things. It took 3 months just to clear the space before I started installing. This is one of the works I did for light. I was thinking of light also in terms of our perception of color. There were other pieces that actually talked about light in and of itself. These are 8,118 tin cans that I collected from my town transfer stations where they recycle things. And inside each can, I placed a color spectrum that I had created in Photoshop and had output on paper. The color spectrum went from red to orange to yellow to green to blue to violet back to red. And I placed the spectra in the cans so that, and on the floor, so that all of the color would be facing the same direction. So all the seams where the red came together would point north, for example. And the result was that as you walk around the piece, which is about 21 feet in diameter, the collective hue of the entire work changes from red to orange to yellow to green to blue to violet back to red. At my 6th solo biennial time, which was in 2010, one of the works that I did was called Undoing One. And I crocheted an hour every day for a year. The result was 72 feet long by 9 feet wide. And I asked participants to undo the yarn, placing what they had undone into this plexiglass box until it was completely undone or the exhibit ended, whichever came first. At my 7th solo biennial space, this is an installation, and this was in 2012 in Winthrop, Maine. This space was 26,000 square feet and on 3 different floors. It was my first multi-level exhibit in the mills. And this was started as 1,520 4x4s of 24 different lengths. And they were arranged in this configuration at the start of the exhibit. I asked participants to, using this chart that I had drawn on the floor, this is like oil paint markers, each of those posts was also lettered. To move the post from the back to the front here, so that the form would progress from convex to concave over the course of the exhibit by the participants moving the wood. At my 8th solo biennial Matter, which was in 2014, this is an installation I did called Shift 1. My dog just came in. This was 9 cubes that were 9 by 9 by 9 inches made of non-drying clay. I asked each participant to change each cube in an identical way. So whatever each participant did to the first cube, to do that to all the cubes. So in theory, at the end of the exhibit, there would be 9 identical forms. And I'll show you a couple pieces from my final solo biennial memory, which is in 2016. So this piece was called Flux 5, and it was a response to body memory as well as the memory that we might hold in our body. And I asked each participant to choose one ball on one of these 2 pedestals. There was 9 balls total and 180 feet between the 2 pedestals. I asked each to choose a ball, cradle it in their hands, and to walk the 180 feet to the other pedestal, placing it on that other pedestal. And I conveyed in the instructions about how this is about carrying the weight of your memory. And I indicated that if anyone would have trouble carrying the ball, because these are each solid steel, 4 pounds, they could ring a bell and I would carry their weight for them. And they could either walk alongside me or just watch from the side. And I thought for sure that somebody would ring the bell, but in the end, everyone carried their own weight. And some people commented, there's one person that commented that they actually carried a weight twice, once for himself and once for his wife who had passed. And it was a very powerful piece to watch people slowly walk with lots of intention. This was my bell. Another work that I did at Memory was called Memoir 1. And it was 99 desks, stools, and books. The books spanned 99 years. So each book had a different year date on its cover. And the year dates went from 1918 through 2016. Because the exhibit was in 2016. And I asked each participant to think of a memory, something that happened during their life that they could describe, to determine in what year that memory took place, and then write that memory in the corresponding book. Or you could choose a year date and think of a memory that occurred in that year date and write it in its book. And I encourage people to write up to 9 different memories, so long as each was in a different book. And my intention is that this is to be an ongoing work. So I would like to keep presenting the work every 1 to 3 years in different locations until within a single 99-year span, each book holds 300 memories. So either keep installing it every year until this happens, or until the year of my 99th birthday, which is 2069, whichever comes first. And once within a 99-year span, there is at least one memory in each book. I would like to publish a little chapbook that has one memory from each year in chronological order. When I finished my solo biennials, it was December 2016, and I took my 2 month rest, and I started working in my studio again for 5 weeks. And I was really excited about this idea of going from a work process that was just so structured and formatted, 9 pieces in each exhibit. The themes had already been determined really early on in my process. Each shows 22 months of work. I knew what kind of space the pieces were going to be installed in. The to-do lists were very similar for each exhibit. I was looking forward to my post-biennial practice of not having a plan, of making work with no plan in mind, and to see what would kind of happen, to actually experiment. And I thought, I was really getting into the process of that for the first 5 weeks. And I was tending to make, just to kind of play around, I was finding myself again concentrating on sort of a theme, probably because I've been doing that for 18 years, working around a theme. And I saw myself without a plan, still kind of navigating toward a theme, which was symmetry after memory. So I was just doing different things in my studio and coming up with different interactive installation ideas. This was an idea that I had during that 5 weeks. It's called Mirror One. It's a drawing of the piece, obviously. And there's, I think, 300 cubes on shelves on each side that begin mirror image. The inside cubes are black and the outside cubes are white. The piece would start like this, and the participants would be asked to change any black cube with any white cube, so long as the result is always symmetrical. And another piece that I had come up with during this 5 weeks was called Array One. In terms of symmetry, I was really interested in arrangement, equality, balance, order, rhythm, and similarity. And again, these are all themes that I had been kind of thinking about as I came up with different ideas for the biennial themes. But I just went with it because I was trying not to have a plan. And this was array 1, another idea that I had during this 5 weeks, where there'd be 2 shelves of cubes. The top shelf would actually have cubes and the bottom shelf would be empty. 99 cubes on the top shelf, no cubes on the bottom shelf. And the cubes would be numbered using hand embossing, using a number punches, so that the numbers read 1 through 99 on the top row. And the instructions would say something like, move all the cubes to the bottom row so that they're in random order. Once all the cubes reach the bottom row, move all the cubes to the top row in order. Once all the cubes reach the top row, move the cubes to the bottom row in random order, and so on, repeat. And then I also, during that 5 weeks, had this image in my head, and I didn't know what it meant yet, and I will come back to this. This is an image of a installation where on one side there's a video of me, and the other side there's a video of my mother. I'm going to come back. So 5 weeks into working in my studio, I had the start of what we would find out was ultimately a brain injury, but it took a lot to figure out what was happening. And it was really scary. Siglinde mentioned that I was hospitalized in 2 different psych wards. The initial symptoms of my injury was that I had a psychosis. So I was seeing things in my head that I couldn't get to turn off, that were really disturbing. And it took a lot of different doctors and a lot of scary months to figure out that what had happened was that I had Lyme disease from a tick bite that I never knew that I had. I never knew I had Lyme disease, and I didn't know that I had been bitten by this tick. And it attacked my brain, basically. I was in a wheelchair for 18 months. My speech has improved a lot. It goes in and out of normal speech. It's pretty normal right now. And in order to get the psychosis to stop, which lasted 22 months, I had to have 16 treatments of electroconvulsive therapy, which used to be called electric shock therapy. Meanwhile, while this was going on, the art community, my regional art community where I live in Maine, USA, they wanted to make sure that I was still able to present the ideas that I was coming up with. So when I had gotten sick, there had been plans for a very large retrospective of my work throughout the state, and this was canceled. But some of the institutions wanted to install my work anyway. So there were curators and different people in the community who took my ideas and made them happen for me through volunteers, and it was just awesome. So this is actually array 1, that piece that I described, actually installed in a space, the cubes in order up top and then placed down below in random order. And then this was mirror 1, installed at the Center for Maine Contemporary Art, which is in Rockland, Maine, for their biennial. So this is what it looks like after some participation. it was neat to watch this unfold, because oftentimes the participants would work in teams to keep it symmetrical. Another exhibit that happened, by now I was up to a walker instead of in my wheelchair, and still couldn't install things myself. I had a lot of practice working with volunteers for my solo biennials. I had about 500 volunteers over the course of the 18 years. So I had a lot of practice, which is good, explaining to people where I want things to go and what I want it to look like. So it was really good that I had that experience. While I was still going through things, I was given a solo exhibit at the University of New Hampshire's Museum of Art. And there were several interactive works. This was called Mirror 3. And I used the same stock that I used for that piece called Inversion 1 that people move to invert. With this mirror piece, Mirror 3, I asked people to move the post from this left side to this right side where you see the outline on the floor, is trying to maintain a mirror image of the installation. And it was interesting because when you would move a post from that original form, you had to try to figure out where its mirror would be. And this is Mirror 4 that was also part of that exhibit. It's similar to Array 1 in that there are cubes on shelves, but these are larger cubes. These are 3-inch. The installation started with black cubes in the innermost spot, then the red, then the yellow, as you can see, all the way to white. And I asked participants to exchange any color cube with any other color cube so that the result is always symmetrical. This is what it looked like the final day. I wanted to mention that, if you remember, I brought up how some participants are kind of rebellious with my instructions, so they will on purpose do something different from what I've asked, or even the opposite. So sometimes people would come into the exhibit with this piece, for example, and they would purposefully move the cube so that it wasn't symmetrical. And I always call those types of participants rebellious, because in a way, they're kind of rebelling against my instructions, and that's fine. Like I said, it's all part of the work. But then there's always who I call the fixers, and they'll spend hours writing what rebels have done, and it's really interesting to watch. When after I started to feel better, I started to do some more symmetrical drawings, and I found that it was really hard to draw symmetry. And then I found that the quote unquote mistakes I were making were so much more interesting than if I had tried to draw symmetrically. The fact that it wasn't symmetric and utterly balanced became what was interesting about the work. And that also had like a personal connection to my brain and the two sides of my brain, being really aware of my brain having two sides and feeling like the injury was on one side of my brain and the a quality or balance of being what I call clicked in, which I am pretty clicked in right now because I'm speaking normally, and not being clicked in, and how that feels in my brain when I can't speak as normally and when I don't have control of my muscles and things like that. During COVID, I presented Memoir 1 in this virtual online way. I installed all of the 99 books behind me on shelves, and I set up one larger desk at which I could sit, and people would email me their memories and tell me what books they go in, and I would live stream writing their memory on their behalf in the books, and also reading the memories out loud if they gave me permission. All the memories in the books are anonymous, and it was really amazing. I did this for 18 hours, 2 hours a day for 9 days, and there was this, just really quickly, there was a really amazing moment when a person had sent me a memory from 1970 describing what it was like for her son to die. And the next memory that I wrote in and read was also from 1970. And it was a mother who was describing the birth of her son. There was all these very random symmetry in balanced things that would happen. Another piece that I've done during COVID, making work out of my studio, again exploring symmetry, was I created this work called Offhand, and it has 9 acts. You can see the different acts through my website, but what I wanted to do was instruct different participants to try to do symmetrical things, but because we are not robots, and no matter how hard you try to be equal and opposite the other person, it's impossible, because there's variations in our movement. We're two different people trying to move the same way, and it's impossible. And there's beauty in that slight off. This is one act where I had pre-instructed 2 participants to build this structure in a symmetrical way. And then in the next act, there were spontaneous participants who I asked to take the structure down as symmetrically as possible, but they had never seen it before and didn't have practice. And it was really fascinating to watch their body language as they tried to mirror each other. This is a project I did recently in a exhibit outside in Westbrook, Maine. It's a exhibit that is curated by Bethany Engstrom. And I was given an opportunity to create an interactive work in a container. These containers are only 20 feet long. So I added a mirror at one end to increase the length visually. I installed over, I think it's 11,178 cubes. There's actually 9 different colors of cubes in layers. The outermost layer is black, and then the next layer is red, and so on through to white. The same 9 colors that I use throughout my practice. And I asked participants to each take home 2 cubes, 1 from each side, so that the result is always symmetrical. So as people took away cubes, this piece would change over time. just going to skip over some things so I can spend the last 5 minutes talking about this piece. So I want to remind you about that image of this image here. Something that I saw before my injury during that 5 weeks was a video work, and each of my biennials had some kind of video or sound work in it. Oftentimes, if it was a video work, there was a head and shoulders video portrait that was used somehow. So I had this image of me and my mother on either side of this large space that people could enter and be between. And I haven't seen my mother since 1994. She estranged herself from our family when I was 23, and we had a very rough childhood. And I really feel like she left because we were all pretty much grown up by now and wanted to start a new life. When I saw this vision in my head, I realized that I wanted to seek her out, essentially. And it gave me this idea for this project where I would cross the country from Maine to California and have conversations with people about relationships they've lost, or people that they've forgiven, or people that they aren't ready to forgive, or people that they don't see themselves ever forgiving. And I'm working on a website that explains this whole project. So as I cross the country, actually setting up different truck tents, a different truck tent in 9 different spots across the United States, where I would talk to people and collect their narratives and stories about forgiveness, while sharing my own story. So I would talk about how I'm crossing the country to find and forgive and ask the forgiveness of my mother, who I haven't seen in 27 years, and share the details of that on my website and with whoever I talk to. Meanwhile, in this sort of truck, make a video, enable that to make video narratives and portraits of people either sharing their stories or just sitting in silence, thinking about a time when they forgave somebody, or like I said, if they can't forgive somebody. And I share in my story things that I can't forgive and things that I have forgiven. And what I want to do is collect these different narratives for use in a interactive exhibition about forgiveness. Also to create a free to find in public places book that alternates between stories of forgiveness and non-forgiveness. And also to create a podcast series, which has 18 parts, where I'll reflect on my travels from east to west and what I'm thinking about as I move toward her. And one of the pages on the website will be a place where people can either share their stories anonymously or even record their stories in case I can't get to their town and so forth. So this is a project I'll be working on next year. And between next year and this year, I'll be the artist in residence at the University of Southern Maine, where I'll be doing a whole other interactive work. I really want to thank all of you for listening to me talk. I know that we're going to do Q&A now. I wanted to mention, if you're curious about my solo biennial project, the 18-year project, they have this great book that you can get through my website. And I'm also on Instagram, and I have a YouTube channel, which are other ways to follow me. And I really appreciate your listening to me talk about this.
Amy, thank you so much for taking us to each one of your pieces in the context of your work. I think this is really important. Also, I think it is important that students know that there are other collaborative projects and not, like static projects. And I think this is really important to know more about these processes. And I think that there are many other background in each one of your projects, and I know that you have a really good website, so I really recommend each one of you to go back and revisit Amy's website. I think there is a lot of information there. And now there is a question here from Fatima, and she is asking, what do you enjoy the most from making your work collaborative? What advice can you give us to include collaboration in our practice?
I really appreciate the collaborative nature of the work that I've been doing for so long, because I am able to make more of an impact with my audience in this way, because they're literally becoming part of these concepts. And the discussions that happen and the relationships that happen, and in meeting all of these different people, really has fed my creative process more than anything over these years. And also collaborating with people, it opens me up to things that I would never have experienced otherwise, to have these relationships that last from, so sometimes I have a discussion with someone at an exhibit around a piece, and I might never see them again, but that 2-minute conversation was so impactful for both of us. And I will sometimes get a letter months or years later from that person and what the piece meant for them. It's just so much more helpful to me than working in a complete static bottle, making things that cannot be, that you can't touch and that you can only see. So I'm having a lot more relationship, which I really like.
Thank you, Amy. Marie-France is making a comment. I'm very interested in your artwork. Would you like to present a solo exhibition at our university cultural space? We have a great place to allow your projects, maybe in collaboration with our students.
Yeah. That would be really great. I would love that opportunity. I really love all of the opportunities that I have been given, not only through these mill exhibits that I independently perpetuated. I made those things happen with a lot of that kind of solo drive, but yeah, I still had a lot of help. But I love these situations that I've been given where I can also exhibit in university galleries or different spaces, because each opportunity is kind of like a chance to problem solve, which I really like doing, to try to come up with something completely unique for that space, something site specific and also people specific. I always keep in mind how large the audience tends to be for the space. Like, do you have maybe 400 people that come through over the course of the month, or do you have 4,000 people? And that really determines what I'll do for work, because whatever I present for the audience to perpetuate, I wouldn't want there to be so little movements that only a little small dent is made in the work's progress. So if it's a space that tends to maybe have 400 people through in a month, there's potentially fewer things or something that can repeat over and over. It's fun. It's really fun to think about any opportunity that I have. It's a privilege and an honor, and the people that I get to meet both while it's being installed and during, watching people participate in the questions that they have, and the things that happen are always really fascinating. They're kind of like sociological experiments sometimes, to just watch how people interact with something. So yes, that was my very long way of saying yes and thank you.
She's answering great with a lot of exclamation marks.
Nice.
Ren is asking, what was the starter for your 18-year project? How you came up with the idea, and what was your experience working with such a long-term project? I mean, emotionally, mentally, and physically.
Yes. I first had the idea I had just completed a master's degree, and it was through that master's degree that I realized that I wanted to make installation in the first place. And back then it was 1998, 97. And installation art wasn't a well-known term back then. I didn't know that what I was making was called installation art yet. I wouldn't know that for a couple years. I just thought it was really large in scope, interactive sculpture. I wasn't really sure what to call it. And then once I became familiar with the term installation art, that made it a lot easier to explain the work for people. But I had just earned my master's and mounted what would be my first solo biennial in 2000. And at the time, I didn't know that was going to be the first of 9. At the time, what would be the first one was me presenting my work to an audience in Maine. I had gotten my master's degree in Vermont, which is just, couple next door states. And when I installed my first interactive works at what would be my first solo biennial, again, not knowing that was the first of 9, the whole experience of seeing people interact, many of the people who came to my very first show were just friends and family. So a lot of them hadn't been to any art exhibit before in their life. And then those that had never been to an exhibit where you were being not only encouraged, but instructed to touch things. We're really taken aback by that. And there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions. Are you sure I can touch this? Are you sure you want me to move this? And I found the that sort of one-on-one contact that I could have with the audience. Really special, encouraging, inspirational. So I knew as I was taking down that first show that I wanted to do this again, and actually thinking about what the possibilities would be. I could have a different theme for each show. I know I can't do this once a year because it's too grueling. I have to do this every other year. 22-month process, need to take a break. Well, I was thinking about all these things while I was taking down the first show, because I found taking down my installations painful. It's very large work. There's no way to store it. It literally only exists while it's installed. So I knew that a lot of the elements were things that I would probably not see again. I would have to recycle materials to make room for new work. At the time, I was living in a very small apartment, and there were literally box mountains filling our home with a path to get to the bed with my materials. I have a very patient husband. And I knew that that 2 months, I can't really explain to you how much that 2-month off meant for my body and my mind and my emotions. I can do my best. It, like I was saying, was really rigorous work to stick to the schedules that I gave myself, and the physical labor of cleaning each mill was astounding, even with any volunteers I happen to have. And then inevitably after each solo biennial, during that 2 months off, I'd have some kind of postpartum depression from finishing such a big project. So that always seemed to fall within that 2 months. So I could kind of go through a sad period while I was also resting, and then be reinvigorated to begin again with the next theme the following February. So I always took my break the months of December and January every other year, so that February, it was almost like a bell would go off in my head, February 1st, ding, and I would be very excited to be thinking of the next theme. And I always started the process of each theme. So say the theme of the biennial cycle was change, which was the third one. I always started the process by reading my thesaurus. I literally read my thesaurus every other year, reading each word that had anything to do with the respective theme. So different words that meant change or sparked that idea of change, like transition and volition and modulation and flux and forward, just these different words that would inspire me. And oftentimes the word that inspired me would become the title of a piece. And sometimes a word would spark a whole idea immediately. And other times I would kind of keep the word in my back pocket, and I would go throughout my days, and suddenly what the piece was going to be would hit me, maybe while I was vacuuming or doing dishes or driving or something. And then I would know, oh, now I know what that is going to be. And I also tried to concentrate on certain words that could be reflected in each of the different themes. Like there's a forward 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and there's a flux 1 through 6, and there's a labyrinth 1 through 9. Different labyrinths that are in the different shows. And so it was neat to like think of the words in the different contexts of the different themes. So I had a lot to inspire me and to start each exhibit. I think I answered your question.
Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Miguel, yeah, she says, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Miguel is making a comment, but also a question. You have a wide range of pieces, some being very formal, like symmetry and the wood blocks, and some other can be very intimate and anecdotic, like the forgiveness piece or the memory piece. How do you decide the formal aspect of the pieces? Is the form a way to the stories?
So within the biennials themselves, I would try to have quite a range or gamut of experiences for the audience. So something that ranged from very simple interaction to something that was deeper and more personal toward the end. And I would kind of put them in order to create a narrative with all 9 of the works. So the first few pieces you would participate with would be something really simple, like the piece for the movement exhibit. The first piece in the show was that one where you simply moved the pegs, removed the pegs and then put them back in randomly. And then over the course of the 9 works that I presented, the works, I wanted to challenge the audience more and more. Not only what I was asking them to do, but to try to sort of impel them to reflect. So kind of by the time they're doing the 8th and 9th work, they're really like thinking about movement or change or light in a whole unique way that they hadn't thought about before. That is but that is also personal to them. By making the works with such simple kind of archetypal shapes and forms like the square and the circle, and oftentimes the work is all white on white, or maybe there's black and white, or maybe there's the 9 colors that I use. By presenting the work in this really fundamental way, I want to create situations where each audience member is most apt to see in the work things that are happening in their own lives. So like, as an example, that same piece with the pegs, volition 1. There was a woman who wrote me about 7 months after the show, and she expressed that while she was participating with that piece, she wasn't sure why, but it gave her some new ideas about how to communicate with her son who had autism. So that was a person who was thinking about these whole other things I never would even have thought they would be thinking about. And that is why I present in these simple forms, so that it opens up for each person any possibility of what they could be thinking of, or what's going on in their life. I hope that answers your question, sort of. It might kind of explain it. And I'm sorry if it didn't. I can try again if you want.
Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
He's answering you. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Fantastic work.
Thank you.
I don't know if anybody has another a comment or a question. No? Well, Amy, thank you so much for your time and for taking us through your work. I think this is fantastic. And well, you now have another opportunity here in Puebla, so it's awesome. Hopefully we can try and do other things together too.
Yeah, I really look forward to this, and I appreciate all of you listening, watching, and for your questions, and just thanks for being here. It means a lot to me.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you, Siglinde. Thank you, everyone.
See you soon.
You too.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you.
Ok, si no hubiera más por el momento, cerramos la sala.